If you grew up in India, you've probably noticed something strange about the older generation. They have an unusual confidence in the advice they give. Not gentle suggestions, but instructions delivered with finality. And this advice begins early. Not at 18 or 21, but almost from childhood. Before you know what career even means, you're already being told what your future should look like. And it continues your whole life. It tells you what subjects you should take, what you should study, what career paths are safe, what choices are dangerous, and what dreams are impractical. On the surface, this looks like normal parenting. But when you examine the content of that advice, you realize something important. Most of the advice Indian boomers gave their children was deeply, structurally wrong. Not because they were malicious, but because they were speaking from a world that no longer exists. To understand why this happened, we must place Indian boomers in a wider global context. Because the idea of boomers, the stereotype of older people who are out of touch with the modern world, did not originate in India at all. It comes from Europe and the United States of America. Those societies experienced something extraordinary after the Second World War, a period historians call the post-war economic boom. Between the 1940s and 1970s, countries like the USA, UK, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and the Nordic nations experienced extremely cheap higher education, massive job expansion, salaries that kept rising, job security across industries, affordable housing, strong welfare systems, predictable careers, generous pensions for people born in that era. The baby boomers. Life unfolded in a straight line. Study, then job, then home, then retirement. This stability produced big, confident beliefs. Just work hard and you'll do well. Housing is always affordable if you save. Loyalty to companies is rewarded. Degrees guarantee good jobs. Today, younger Western generations mock these ideas because their world is nothing like the one their parents had. But here is where India's story becomes interesting. Indian boomers were born in a completely different material environment. They did not grow up in an economic boom. They grew up in a newly independent nation that was still struggling. Slow economic growth, few industries, rationing and shortages, limited higher education, restricted private sector, minimal global exposure. And yet, despite these differences, Indian boomers developed strikingly similar beliefs to European and American boomers. Not because they had the same prosperity, but because they experienced predictability, which is its own form of privilege. Their world was stable in a different way. Schools were affordable, degrees were valuable, competition was low, government jobs were expanding, pensions were guaranteed, salaries grew slowly but steadily, life costs were modest, career paths were linear, risk-taking was unnecessary. In other words, Western boomers were shaped by prosperity. Indian boomers were shaped by stability. But psychologically, the result was the same: a belief that the world rewards patience, loyalty, and steady effort, and that major life decisions should be made early and never questioned. And this is where the damage begins, because they passed this worldview to their children even though our world is nothing like theirs. Which brings us to the actual bad advice they gave, the advice millions of Indians grew up hearing, the advice that promised outcomes that were objectively false in modern India. Just get a degree and your life will be set. Don't take commerce. Serious students take science. Engineering is safest. Do it even if you don't like it. Arts has no future. Avoid humanities. Dancing, acting, and creative fields are hobbies, not careers. Don't talk to the opposite gender. It will distract you and ruin everything. Study hard till 12th. After that, life becomes easy. And it went on and on. A loop of certainty, repeated endlessly across families and decades, until it stopped being advice and quietly became destiny. Because when a generation hears these sentences from childhood to adulthood, something subtle but devastating happens. They stop being opinions and start becoming the rules of life. Rules that shape decisions, narrow choices, and close doors long before you realize what's happening. And the damage from this kind of advice wasn't small or personal. It was structural, generational, and spread across the lives of millions. An entire population was pushed into degrees they didn't enjoy, streams they weren't suited for, careers they never chose, and social restrictions they never agreed to. Curiosity died early. Exploration stopped before it began. Creativity was treated as a liability. Interacting normally with the opposite gender became a moral crime. Half the job market was dismissed as not respectable, and millions of young Indians grew into adults who had no idea what they actually wanted, because wanting itself was never allowed. People weren't guided into careers, they were funneled into them. Talent wasn't discovered, it was suppressed. Potential wasn't nurtured, it was redirected into whatever path was considered safe in the 1970s. And when these predictable, safe roads collapsed under the weight of a changing world, when degrees lost value, when engineering flooded, when competition exploded, when careers became nonlinear, the people who gave this advice did not pause, did not reflect, did not reconsider. They simply blamed the children for not succeeding in a world that looked nothing like the one they grew up in. There was no accountability, no acknowledgement of mismatch, no ownership of the consequences. The advice was given with total certainty, and the fallout was treated as our failure. We were expected to navigate a modern, chaotic, globalized economy using instructions designed for a slow-moving country that no longer exists. And the price for that mismatch was paid entirely by the younger generation. They were raised in a world designed to hold them gently. A world that moved slowly, rewarded patience, protected jobs, and offered a predictable ladder from youth to old age. They enjoyed stable schooling, affordable education, reasonable competition, expanding government jobs, lifetime pensions, low living costs, manageable housing prices, and a society where failure did not destroy your future. They grew up with long, unstructured childhoods that allowed boredom, curiosity, unhurried growth. They played outside for hours, bonded with extended families, absorbed emotional support by default, and transitioned into adulthood at a human pace. And when they entered the workforce, they entered an economy that wanted them. Vacancies existed. Promotions were automatic. Companies rarely fired. Government roles came with housing, allowances, and guaranteed retirement. It was not a wealthy world, but it was a stable one. Stable enough that being average still got you a decent life. This stability shaped their lives gently from beginning to end. But when it came time for them to pass these conditions forward, they didn't. In fact, much of what made their own lives comfortable was dismantled, restricted, or quietly taken away once they became the generation in power. And this contrast becomes even sharper when you look at the emotional landscape. Their childhoods were expansive. They had long afternoons, open fields, cousins as playmates, neighbors who acted like extended family, and a general cultural permission to simply exist without constant evaluation. They were not told to optimize every free hour. They were not told their entire future depended on a single exam. They were not expected to build resumes at age 14. They were not taught to fear failure as a life sentence. They were loved broadly, easily, without conditions. A bad exam result meant disappointment, not doom. A wrong career choice could be forgiven, not punished. A late start did not mean a ruined life. And an ordinary life was considered perfectly fine. But somewhere between their childhood and ours, they decided that softness was a liability. They turned affection into anxiety, support into supervision, protection into policing, and guidance into control. They received freedom and passed down fear. They grew up exploring the world slowly and raised children who were told exploration is a waste of time. They enjoyed unstructured play and imposed regimented schedules. They experienced human connection effortlessly and forbade their children from talking to the opposite gender as if normal interaction itself were a threat. They entered adulthood at 25 and expected their children to have life figured out by 17. They were allowed to make mistakes and demanded perfection from the next generation. They inherited a forgiving world and created an unforgiving one. And when confronted with this contrast, they rarely, if ever, admit that the terrain beneath our feet is nothing like the one they walked on. No recognition, No accountability. Only comparison. Why are you so stressed? Why don't you have clarity? Why can't you settle down? In our time, we didn't complain. But the truth is simple. They did not face the world they delivered to us. And they do not want to admit that they helped design its harshness. In the end, this isn't about blame. It's about honesty, something our society avoids whenever generations collide. We are not failing their expectations. Their expectations failed to adapt to the world they handed us. A world where stability isn't guaranteed. Where degrees don't guarantee jobs. Where careers are fluid. Where risk is necessary. Where creativity has value. Where networking matters. Where companies don't reward loyalty. Where entire industries rise and fall in 5 years. Where adulthood is more complex, not less. And the only way to survive, and to remain sane, is to stop living by rules written for a different century. Not out of disrespect, but out of realism. Not because their generation didn't work hard, but because their world didn't resemble ours. And the sooner we stop following outdated instructions and start building our own systems, our own skills, our own timelines, the more this generation will reclaim what was lost. Choice. Clarity. Direction. Identity. A life shaped by intention, not by inherited fear. Because in the end, what damaged us wasn't the lack of advice, it was the certainty behind the wrong advice. And the future will belong to those who finally let go of that certainty and choose the world they want to build instead of the one they were told to inherit. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who grew up hearing the same advice. And if you want more conversations like this, like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe.